The silence of deep space had a weight to it. Kael'thor had learned this truth during his 3 cycles of drifting alone. His survey vessel, once a pride of Zentarii engineering, now floated dead in the darkness between stars. The engine core had failed catastrophically, taking life support, navigation, and propulsion with it. Only emergency power remained, giving him dim lights and slowly depleting oxygen reserves. Kael'thor's slender fingers moved across the control panel with practiced grace. His species, the Zentarii, were known throughout the Galactic Council for their exceptional sensory abilities and precise movements. They were scholars, navigators, and scientists. They were not, however, survivors. Their bodies were fragile, adapted for controlled environments and careful planning. Deep space was not a place for his kind to be alone. The distress beacon continued its endless broadcast, sending out a signal that likely no one would hear. This sector was unexplored, far beyond the mapped territories that most species considered safe. Kael'thor had been part of a survey mission, charting new routes for the Council. His ship had separated from the main fleet to investigate an anomaly. That decision now seemed foolish, arrogant even. The Zentarii prided themselves on their caution, yet here he was dying in the void because of curiosity. He pulled up his personal log and began recording. It was tradition among his people to leave final thoughts, a way to ensure their knowledge would not be lost. His voice, melodic and soft, filled the quiet cabin. This is Navigator Kael'thor, registration ZN4782, recording my final observations. I have been adrift for 3 cycles. Oxygen reserves will last perhaps another half cycle at current consumption. I have accepted that rescue will not arrive in time. He paused, his large eyes reflecting the dim console lights. The Zentarii had excellent vision, able to see across a broader spectrum than most species. Right now, that gift only allowed him to see his death approaching with greater clarity. His thoughts drifted to the humans. They were the newest species to join the Galactic Council, admitted only 30 cycles ago. The other species had debated their inclusion for years. Humans were strange, unsettling even. They were emotional where others were logical. They took risks that seemed insane to more established species. They had reached space through brute force and determination, rather than the careful, measured progress that marked truly civilized species. Kael'thor had met humans only twice. Both times he had found them difficult to read. Their faces moved constantly, expressing emotions that seemed excessive. They spoke quickly, often using metaphors that made no sense to literal-minded species. The Council tolerated them because human ships were effective, their soldiers fierce, and their technology advancing at an alarming rate. But toleration was not respect. The console beeped. Kael'thor's head snapped toward the display. A contact. Something was approaching through the darkness. His hearts began beating faster, hope and fear mixing in equal measure. The contact was massive, larger than any Council survey vessel. Larger than most military ships he had encountered. His trembling fingers worked the failing sensors trying to get more information. The ship was still far away, but closing at a steady pace. Was it a rescue vessel? A pirate? Something worse? The unknown sectors held dangers that the Council had only begun to catalog. Ancient species, territorial and hostile, were known to exist in these depths. Kael'thor prepared his distress call. He needed to transmit his species identification, his ship's registry, and his situation. The standard protocol was clear. He opened the communication channel, his mouth forming the first words of the Zentarii emergency protocol. This is Navigator Kael'thor of the Zentarii Science Fleet. My vessel has suffered critical failure, and I require immediate— We're already on our way, Kael'thor froze. The voice had come through his speakers in perfect Zentarii, the accent flawless, the tone calm and assured. But that was impossible. He had not finished his message. He had not even transmitted his situation. How could they respond to a call he had not yet completed? His mind raced through possibilities. Advanced sensor technology? Perhaps they had scanned his ship and determined his species and situation before he spoke. But the timing was wrong. The response had come the instant he opened the channel, even as his own words were still forming. It was as if they had known what he would say before he said it. The massive contact drew closer. Kael'thor's sensors, operating on emergency power, could barely provide details. The ship's configuration was unfamiliar. The energy signature was strange, pulsing with patterns he did not recognize. And then, as the vessel emerged from the darkness into the range of his visual sensors, He saw the markings. Human. The ship was human. Terror and confusion washed over him. Human vessels were rarely seen in deep space, especially not alone. They typically traveled in groups, their lack of experience making solo operations dangerous. And yet this ship, this enormous warship, had appeared in one of the most remote sectors of known space. It had answered his call before he made it. The communication channel remained open but silent. Kael'thor stared at his console, afraid to speak, afraid to move. Every story he had heard about humans came flooding back. Their unpredictability, their capacity for violence, their strange alien way of thinking that other species found deeply unsettling. But he was dying. His oxygen was failing. Whatever the humans wanted, whatever strange agenda had brought them to this forgotten corner of space, he had no choice but to accept their help, or their intentions. The massive ship continued its approach, growing larger in his viewport until it filled his vision entirely. Kael'thor could see details now. Weapon arrays, sensor clusters, and hull plating that looked far more advanced than any human ship he had seen before. This was not a simple patrol vessel. This was a warship, built for purposes he could only imagine, and somehow, impossibly, they had known he needed help before he asked for it. The silence returned, heavier than before, as Kael'thor waited to learn what happened when humans found you lost in the darkness between stars. The docking clamp seized Kael'thor's dying vessel with a firmness that made the hull groan. Through his viewport, he could see human figures in sleek EVA suits moving with purpose along the exterior of his ship. They worked quickly, efficiently, with none of the careful, measured movements that Zentari engineers would use. Yet somehow they accomplished their tasks faster than any crew he had worked with before. A voice came through his communication system again, still speaking flawless Zentari. "Navigator Kael'thor, we're pressurizing the docking corridor now. Please remain calm. We'll have you aboard in approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds. The precision of the estimate struck him as odd. Most species would say soon or a few moments. Humans, it seemed, measured everything. The airlock cycled. Kael'thor stood on shaking legs as 3 humans entered his ship. They wore form-fitting suits that seemed both flexible and armored. Their helmets retracted with a soft hiss, revealing faces that displayed concern and focus. The lead human was female, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes scanning him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Can you walk?" she asked in Zentari. Kael'thor nodded, not trusting his voice. His people's bodies were tall but slender, and 3 cycles of stress had weakened him considerably. The female human stepped forward and offered her arm. He hesitated, then accepted. Her grip was firm but gentle, supporting his weight as they moved toward the airlock. The interior of the human warship was nothing like he expected. The corridors were wide and well lit, but the design was utilitarian. No decorative elements, no artistic touches that most species included in their vessels. Everything served a purpose. The crew members they passed moved with rapid efficiency, nodding to their rescuers but never slowing their own tasks. They brought him to a medical bay. The room was clean and filled with equipment that seemed far more advanced than standard council medical technology. A human male in medical uniform approached, his scanner already active and analyzing Kael'thor before he even spoke. Oxygen deprivation, mild dehydration, elevated stress markers. "Nothing we can't fix," the doctor said, more to his companions than to Kael'thor. "Get him on a breather and start hydration. I want a full scan." The treatment was swift and effective. Within minutes, Kael'thor felt strength returning to his limbs. His breathing came easier. The fog that had begun clouding his thoughts lifted. The humans worked around him with practiced coordination, each knowing their role without needing to communicate. As the medical team finished, a new human entered. She wore a uniform with rank insignia that Kael'thor recognized as senior officer markings. She was smaller than the others, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. When she spoke, it was with authority. "Navigator Kael'thor, I'm Commander Sarah Chen, First Officer of the UHNS Prescient. Welcome aboard. I'm glad we reached you in time." "Commander Chen," Kael'thor managed, his voice still weak. "I must ask, how did you know? How did you answer my distress call before I finished sending it?" Chen's expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "I think you should see our bridge. It'll be easier to explain with context." She led him through more corridors, past crew members who spared him curious glances but continued their work. The efficiency was remarkable. On Zentari vessels, there was always careful discussion, measured consideration before any action. Here decisions seemed to flow naturally, rapidly, each person anticipating what was needed. The bridge was larger than any he had seen on a council vessel of comparable size. Stations arranged in a circle around a central command platform. Displays showing more information than he could process. And the crew, perhaps 20 humans, all working at a pace that seemed impossible to maintain. Yet they showed no signs of stress or confusion. A human male stood at the command platform, his posture relaxed but alert. His uniform marked him as the captain. He turned as they entered, offering a slight smile. "Navigator Kael'thor, I'm Captain Marcus Webb. I hope our medical team treated you well." "They did, Captain. Thank you for saving my life." Kael'thor paused, gathering courage. "But I must understand. How did you respond to my call before I made it?" Webb nodded as if expecting the question. "Commander Chen, bring up the prediction logs from the rescue operation." One of the displays shifted, showing a cascade of data that Kael'thor could barely follow. Chen stepped forward, using her hand to highlight sections. "The prescient is equipped with experimental predictive analysis systems," she explained. "We detected your distress beacon 73 minutes before you attempted direct communication. Our systems analyzed your ship's configuration, identified you as Zentari, assessed your probable oxygen reserves, and modeled your most likely communication protocols." She pulled up another display showing branching probability trees. "When you opened a communication channel, our AI had already calculated the 17 most probable messages you would send. Standard Zentari emergency protocol was 97% likely. We prepared a response to the most probable message and transmitted it the moment we confirmed the pattern match." Kael'thor stared at the displays, his mind struggling to accept what he was hearing. But that would require processing power beyond anything the Council has achieved, and the accuracy needed is possible with human neural network architectures combined with quantum processing. Webb finished. "We've been developing this technology for the past 8 cycles. The Prescient is the first vessel fully equipped with the system. But why?" Kael'thor asked. "What purpose does such technology serve?" The bridge fell silent for a moment. Webb's expression hardened slightly. "We're hunting pirates in this sector. The Korthax have been attacking Council vessels for years, and no one has been able to stop them effectively. They scatter when opposed by superior forces, regroup, and strike again. We needed an advantage," Chen added. "The predictive system allows us to anticipate enemy movements, calculate probable attack vectors, and position ourselves optimally. We don't react to threats, we predict them." Kael'thor felt a chill run through his body. This was military technology far beyond what he had imagined humans capable of developing. The other Council species viewed humans as barely civilized, their ships crude and their tactics simple. But this vessel, this crew, this technology, it suggested something else entirely. "How many ships have you saved?" he asked quietly. "Yours is the 7th, Webb replied. "We've also eliminated 3 pirate groups operating in this sector. The Korthax are learning to avoid areas where we patrol." Before Kael'thor could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. The crew's relaxed efficiency transformed into intense focus within seconds. Displays lit up with new contacts, and Kael'thor heard the calm voice of a human officer announcing incoming vessels. "Contact. Multiple signatures. Configuration matches Korthax battle patterns. Count as 18 vessels, including 3 heavy cruisers." Webb's expression didn't change, but his posture shifted slightly. He looked at Chen, who was already pulling up tactical displays. The prediction systems began showing probability cascades, branches of possible futures splitting across the screens. "Well," Webb said calmly, "it seems the pirates found us before we found them." Kael'thor's heart hammered in his chest. 18 ships against 1. On any Council vessel, the captain would be ordering retreat, calling for reinforcements, preparing to flee. But Webb simply walked to his command station and began, issuing orders with the same calm efficiency he had shown when greeting a rescued navigator, and Kael'thor realized with growing horror that the humans were not preparing to run. They were preparing to fight. The tactical display showed the Korthax fleet spreading into an attack formation. Kael'thor recognized the pattern immediately. He had studied pirate tactics as part of his navigator training. The Korthax were positioning themselves to surround and overwhelm their target, 18 ships against 1. The outcome seemed obvious and terrible. "Captain, perhaps we should withdraw and call for support," Kael'thor suggested, trying to keep his voice steady. "The Council has protocols for—" "With respect, Navigator, we don't follow Council protocols," Webb interrupted, his eyes never leaving the displays. "Commander Chen, time to weapons range." 4 minutes, 17 seconds at current approach vectors. Chen replied instantly. "Prediction matrix shows they'll attempt to split us from multiple angles. Primary assault will come from the heavy cruisers while lighter vessels harass our flanks. Adjust position to counter formation Delta 7. Charge primary weapons. Activate full defensive suite." Kael'thor watched in disbelief as the bridge crew responded without hesitation. Their movements were synchronized, almost choreographed. The ship began maneuvering, and the Zentari navigator felt the smooth acceleration. Human inertial dampeners were supposedly crude compared to Council technology. Yet he felt almost nothing. "Captain," a young human at the weapons station called out, "prediction system shows optimal firing solutions for initial contact." "Hold fire until they commit to their attack vectors," Webb ordered. "Let them think they have the advantage." The Korthax were feared throughout this sector. They were larger than humans, powerfully built, with natural armor plating and aggressive instincts. Their ships were stolen from various species, modified and reinforced. They had been raiding Council vessels for decades, and no military force had managed to stop them effectively. The pirates were too mobile, too willing to flee and regroup. Now they approached the Prescient with what seemed like confidence. Kael'thor could see their formation tightening. In 3 minutes the battle would begin. In 4 minutes he expected he would be dead. "Incoming communications," the officer at the communication station announced. "The Korthax flagship wants to talk." "Put it through," Webb said calmly. A harsh, guttural voice filled the bridge, speaking in broken Council standard language. "Human vessel, you are surrounded. Surrender your ship and your cargo. We will spare your lives. Resist and we will take everything." Webb smiled slightly, a gesture that made Kael'thor's skin prickle. "This is Captain Webb of the United Human Navy ship Prescient. I'm afraid I can't accept your offer, but I'm willing to give you one chance to surrender. You have 60 seconds to decide." The Korthax voice laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You think you can threaten us? We are 18. You are 1. Your human arrogance will kill you." 45 seconds, Webb said simply, then cut the communication. Kael'thor couldn't stay silent. "Captain Webb, I appreciate your courage, but this is suicide. The Korthax will destroy us. We need to retreat." Webb turned to look at him directly. "Navigator, let me share something about humans. We don't calculate if we can win. We calculate how fast we can win. There's a difference." Before Kael'thor could respond, the tactical officer called out, "Korthax fleet accelerating. Attack pattern matches prediction model 7 with 94% accuracy. Time to weapons range, 1 minute, 40 seconds. Weapons free on my mark," Webb commanded. "Point defense active. Begin evasive pattern Zeta." The Prescient began moving in ways that seemed random to Kael'thor. The ship twisted, rolled, and accelerated in directions that made no tactical sense. But then he noticed something on the displays. The Korthax missiles, launched seconds ago, were passing through empty space where the Prescient had been. Not where it was, but where it had been exactly when the missiles needed to arrive. "Port ventral attack in 7 seconds, a tactical officer called out. "Mark." 7 seconds later, a Korthax light cruiser appeared exactly where predicted, weapons blazing. But the Prescient had already moved. Its point defense systems opened fire, not at the ship but at the space in front of it. The Korthax vessel flew directly into the defensive fire, its shields flaring and failing. "Starboard high attack in 4 seconds. Mark." Again, the prediction was perfect. Another Korthax ship appeared, fired, and found only empty space while human weapons tore into its hull. Kael'thor watched in amazement as the battle unfolded. It was like watching someone dodge rain by knowing where each drop would fall. The Prescient moved through the battlefield like it was dancing to music only it could hear. Every Korthax attack hit nothing. Every human attack found its target. "Heavy cruiser targeting our reactor section," Chen announced. "Firing solution calculated. 3, 2, 1 at mark." The Prescient's main weapons fired at what appeared to be empty space. Then a Korthax heavy cruiser emerged from its attack run, moving directly into the path of the human weapons. The explosion was massive, lighting up the darkness of space. The heavy cruiser's shields held, but barely. It began retreating, trailing atmosphere. They're panicking, Webb observed, his voice still calm. Prediction matrix shows increased probability of retreat behavior. Maintain pressure. The remaining Korthax ships were no longer attacking in coordination. They fired wildly, their formation breaking apart. The Prescient continued its impossible dance, always one step ahead, always knowing where the enemy would be before they arrived. Another light cruiser exploded. Then another. The Korthax were firing everything they had, but human point defense intercepted their missiles before they even launched. The weapons officers somehow knew which ships would fire, calculating intercept courses for missiles that weren't yet in flight. The second heavy cruiser tried to close to ramming distance, a desperate Korthax tactic. But the Prescient predicted the maneuver and rolled away, its weapons carving deep into the cruiser's hull as it passed. The massive pirate ship lost power and began drifting. Kelthor realized he was gripping his seat so hard his fingers hurt. This wasn't battle. This was something else. The humans weren't fighting. They were executing a plan, and the Korthax were following it perfectly without knowing. Flagship attempting to flee, Tactical announced. Jump coordinates calculated. They'll run. Prediction suite shows their most likely jump destination, Chen said, pulling up a star chart. 3 possible systems, but probability favors the second one. 89% confidence, Webb nodded. Calculate jump to intercept. We'll be there when they arrive. Captain, they haven't jumped yet, Kelthor protested. They will, Webb replied, and we'll be waiting. The flagship began its jump sequence. The Prescient activated its own jump drive simultaneously. Reality twisted, and for a moment Kelthor felt the strange sensation of faster-than-light travel. When the ship emerged, they were in a different system. Empty, quiet. Contact in 3, 2, 1. Mark. Chen counted down. The Korthax flagship appeared exactly where predicted, directly in front of the Prescient's weapons. Before the pirates could react, human weapons locked on and fired. Not to destroy, but to disable. The flagship's engines exploded, leaving it dead in space. Incoming communication, the communication officer said. The flagship is surrendering. Webb nodded. Accept their surrender. Prepare boarding parties. Commander Chen, coordinate with our other units. I want the remaining pirates in custody within the hour. Only then did Kelthor realize that human reinforcements must have been nearby. But no, the tactical display showed no other ships. Webb noticed his confusion and explained. The other pirates are surrendering on their own. Once they saw their flagship fall, they lost their will to fight. Korthax culture prioritizes survival. They're pragmatic about defeat. Kelthor stared at the captain. You knew they would surrender. You knew the flagship would jump here. You knew how the entire battle would unfold. Not exactly, Webb corrected. We knew the most probable outcomes and prepared for them. The Korthax are predictable. Their tactics follow patterns. Once you understand the patterns, you can be where they'll be before they know they'll be there. As the adrenaline faded, Kelthor felt something new, a deep, unsettling realization about what humans truly were. He had thought them reckless and emotional. But this crew had just defeated 18 enemy vessels without taking a single hit. They had done it with cold calculation and perfect prediction. And Webb had said something at the start that now seemed terrifying. They hadn't calculated if they could win. They had calculated how fast they could win. What kind of species thought that way? The interrogation rooms were located deep in the Prescient's secured section. Kelthor had been invited to observe, as his survey data might help with understanding the pirates' movements in the sector. He sat in an observation room with Commander Chen, watching through a transparent wall as human intelligence officers questioned a captured Korthax captain. The Korthax was massive, easily twice the size of any human in the room, with thick armor plating covering his skin. His species had evolved as apex predators on a brutal world. Yet despite his physical advantages, the pirate looked nervous. His eyes kept darting to the humans with something that resembled fear. Tell me about your operations in this sector, the human interrogator said calmly. She was small compared to the Korthax, but her voice carried absolute authority. We raid. We take cargo. We survived, the pirate growled. That is all. You've been raiding for 3 years. 17 confirmed attacks on council vessels. But your pattern changed 6 months ago. You started avoiding certain routes. Why? The Korthax shifted uncomfortably. Smart pirates know when to change territory. Who hired you? The interrogator pressed. The pirate's eyes widened slightly. A tell, Kelthor realized. The humans had touched on something important. Chen leaned forward in the observation room, her attention focused completely on the interrogation. "Did you see that?" He knows something. In the interrogation room, the human officer continued. "We found encrypted communications in your flagship's databanks. You're not independent pirates. You work for someone. Who?" The Korthax remained silent, but his body language spoke volumes. Fear was evident now, strong enough to overcome his natural aggression. "He's more afraid of his employer than of us," Chen observed. "That's interesting." The interrogator changed tactics. 6 months ago, 3 Council science vessels disappeared in this sector. Complete disappearances. No debris, no distress calls, no evidence. That's not your style. Pirates leave wreckage. The Korthax flinched. "You didn't take those ships," the interrogator continued. "But you know who did." After a long pause, the pirate spoke, his voice lower. "The Velchar." Chen's expression hardened. She activated her communication link. "Captain Webb, we have a situation." Minutes later, Webb entered the observation room. Kael'thor noticed that several other senior officers had gathered as well. The captain's casual demeanor was gone, replaced by intense focus. "The Velchar," Webb said quietly. "I was hoping we were wrong." "Who are the Velchar?" Kael'thor asked. "I've never heard of them." Chen pulled up a display showing historical records. Ancient species. Most council records list them as extinct, destroyed in a war over 2,000 years ago. But there have been rumors, unconfirmed sightings. Ships appearing and disappearing without explanation. Webb added. "They're masters of temporal displacement technology. They exist slightly out of phase with normal space-time. Makes them nearly impossible to detect or target with conventional weapons." Kael'thor felt his blood run cold. "If they're real and they're in this sector, they've been hunting council ships for centuries," Chen finished. "They let pirates like the Korthax take the blame. Perfect cover." In the interrogation room, the human officer was pressing for more information. The Korthax captain was talking now, words flowing in desperate confession. "The Velchar hired us 2 years ago, gave us coordinates, told us which ships to raid. Paid well, but they had rules. We could never touch human vessels. They warned us that humans were different, dangerous. We thought they were being cautious. Now I understand." "What changed 6 months ago?" the interrogator asked. "Human colony transport. The Velchar attacked it themselves. Killed everyone. 127 humans dead. After that, the Velchar told us to increase our raids to distract attention. They said humans would come hunting them. They wanted us to be bait." The observation room fell silent. Kael'thor looked at Webb and saw something in the captain's eyes that frightened him. Cold rage, perfectly controlled but absolutely present. "How long have you been hunting them?" Kael'thor asked quietly. 8 months, Webb replied. "Since the colony transport." The prescience predictive systems were still experimental then. "We've been refining them specifically to track the Velchar. They're ghosts, but ghosts leave patterns if you know how to look." Chen pulled up more data. "The pirate raids were distractions. They wanted us focused on the Korthax while the Velchar studied us. They've been learning our tactics, our capabilities. And now they know about our predictive systems," Webb said, "which means they'll be preparing to counter them. The only question is when they'll make their move." Alarms blared throughout the ship. Kael'thor jumped, but the humans moved with practiced efficiency. Webb was already heading toward the bridge, Chen close behind. Kael'thor followed, his heart's racing. On the bridge, the display showed something impossible. A ship was decloaking at close range, but it wasn't simply appearing. It was phasing into existence, flickering between states. Parts of it seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. "Velchar battleship," Tactical announced. "Configuration matches historical records. They're charging weapons." Webb took his command station, his expression calm once more. "This is what they do. They appear, destroy their target before it can react, then disappear. They've perfected ambush warfare over millennia." "Captain, conventional weapons can't lock on," the weapons officer reported. "They're existing in quantum superposition. When we target where they are, they're not there. When we predict where they'll be, they shift." Kael'thor realized the trap. The entire battle with the Korthax had been bait. The Velchar had been watching, waiting. Now they were striking when the prescient was damaged and tired from combat. It was perfect strategy, but Webb was smiling. "Commander Chen, activate the full predictive suite. Not just tactical prediction, full temporal analysis." Chen's fingers flew across her console. Captain, that's never been tested in combat. The processing load could overload our systems. Do it. The bridge lights dimmed as massive amounts of power redirected to the prediction systems. Every display lit up with cascading probability matrices, branching futures splitting and recombining in patterns too complex for Kael'thor to follow. The crew worked at their stations, their movements now synchronized to an even greater degree. Temporal prediction active, Chen announced. We're not just tracking where they are. We're tracking when they are. Webb stood, walking to the center of the bridge. The Velchar think temporal displacement makes them invisible. But displacement means transition. They have to move between quantum states to attack. And every transition follows rules. Physics doesn't care how advanced your technology is. On the display, the Velchar ship continued its impossible dance, existing in multiple states at once. But now human computers were calculating something else. Not where the ship was in space, but when it was in time. Prediction matrix complete, Tactical announced. They'll phase into our reality to fire their main weapon in 17 seconds. They have to become fully real to affect normal space. That's their weakness. All weapons target the phase transition point, Webb commanded. We're not shooting where they are. We're shooting when they must be. Kael'thor watched the countdown. 17 seconds, 16, 15. The Velchar ship flickered and shifted, impossible to track with normal sensors. But the human prediction system showed a single point in spacetime where the ship had to exist to fire its weapons. 5 seconds. 4, 3. Fire, Webb said quietly. Every weapon on the prescient fired at empty space. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Velchar ship phased into reality exactly where predicted. Exactly when predicted. And human weapons were already there, striking with perfect precision. The Velchar shields flared, overloaded, and failed. The battleship's hull cracked, atmosphere venting into space. Again, Webb ordered. They'll try to phase out. Predict the transition, the process repeated. The Velchar tried to disappear, to shift back into quantum uncertainty. But the moment they began the transition, human weapons found them. They couldn't escape. Every time they tried to move between states, humans were waiting. Their temporal drives are failing, Chen reported. They're stuck in normal space. The Velchar battleship drifted, crippled and powerless. Kael'thor stared in disbelief. An ancient species with technology that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years had been defeated in minutes by humans who had barely been in space for a century. Prepare boarding parties, Webb commanded. I want that ship secured and their command crew in custody. And I want their temporal drive technology intact. We have questions that need answers. As the crew worked to secure their victory, Webb turned to Kael'thor. Navigator, you asked earlier how we knew to answer your distress call before you finished it. This is how. We don't just predict what enemies will do. We predict what they must do. Every species, every technology, every decision follows patterns. The Velchar thought temporal displacement made them unpredictable. But predictability isn't about seeing what someone will do. It's about understanding what someone can do. Kael'thor finally understood what humans truly were. They weren't reckless. They weren't emotional. They were hunters who had evolved to track prey across time and space itself. The Velchar command chamber was unlike anything Kael'thor had ever seen. The walls seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, solid and transparent at once. Technology from a civilization that had mastered time itself surrounded them. Human Marines stood guard, their weapons ready, as Webb and his officers faced the captured Velchar captain. The Velchar was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shimmer between colors. Its eyes held an intelligence that spoke of millennia of accumulated knowledge. Despite being captured and disarmed, it carried itself with dignity. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that suggested communication across multiple dimensions. I am Captain Gelnoth of the Velchar Supremacy. I demand to know how you defeated our temporal displacement technology. It has protected my people for 3,000 years. Webb stood across from the alien, his expression calm but hard. You killed 127 civilians on a colony transport. They were families, children. You murdered them to study human response patterns. War requires intelligence, Gelnoth replied without emotion. Your species is new. We needed to understand your capabilities. The transport was an acceptable sacrifice for strategic knowledge. Kael'thor saw Webb's jaw tighten. The human captain took a breath before responding. You made a mistake. You assumed we think like other species. You thought you could predict us using the same models that worked on civilizations that evolved differently. Your predictive systems are impressive, Gelnoth acknowledged, but they are simply advanced computation. Pattern recognition enhanced by artificial intelligence. Many species have developed similar technology. No, Commander Chen interjected, stepping forward. They haven't, because our predictive systems aren't just technology. They're an extension of what humans evolved to do naturally. Webb began walking around the Velchar captain, his movement deliberate. 50,000 years ago, my ancestors hunted animals across the plains of Earth. They couldn't outrun their prey. They weren't stronger or better armed, but they could do something no other predator could do. They could predict. All predators predict, Gelnoth said dismissively. Not like humans, Webb continued. We tracked animals for days, sometimes weeks. We followed broken branches, disturbed soil, subtle changes in animal behavior. We predicted where prey would go for water, when they would rest, how they would react to pressure. We didn't just chase. We understood patterns so deeply we could anticipate behavior across vast distances and timescales. Chen added, that's what your temporal displacement technology did. It created patterns. Every time you shifted between quantum states, you left traces. Not physical traces, probability traces. Our systems detected them. Kael'thor was beginning to understand. The predictive technology doesn't just calculate outcomes. It reads patterns the way human hunters read tracks. Exactly, Webb confirmed. We evolved to fill in gaps that logic alone can't explain. We see a broken twig and know which direction the prey went, how long ago, how fast they were moving. We took that instinct and gave it computer processing power. That's what makes human predictive systems different. They combine calculation with intuition. Gelnoth's expression changed, showing what might have been respect or fear. You hunted us, not as prey hunts reacting to danger, but as predators hunt, following patterns until the prey has nowhere to run. We studied 8 months of council ship disappearances, Chen explained. Each disappearance showed subtle probability anomalies, quantum fluctuations that didn't match natural patterns. Your temporal technology leaves fingerprints in space-time itself. Once we knew what to look for, we followed you here. The pirate battle was bait, Kael'thor said, suddenly understanding the full picture. You knew they would call the Velchar. You wanted this confrontation? Webb nodded. We needed you to attack under conditions we controlled. We needed to see your displacement technology in combat, to confirm our models were accurate. The Korthax served that purpose. Gelnoth's shimmer intensified, perhaps indicating emotional distress. You manipulated an entire battle fleet as bait to draw out one ship. That level of strategic thinking. It should not be possible for such a young species. You're thinking about it wrong, Webb replied. It's not about being young or old. It's about what you evolved to do. Your species mastered temporal technology. Impressive, but humans mastered prediction. We see patterns in chaos. We fill gaps with intuition. We hunt across time not because we have technology that lets us, but because our minds were shaped by millions of years of evolution to think that way. Commander Chen pulled up displays showing the battle analysis. Every attack you made followed patterns. When you phased into normal space to fire weapons, when you transitioned between states, how you responded to threats. Your technology is advanced, but your tactics are ancient. Once we understood your patterns, you became predictable. Impossible, Gelnoth said, but the word lacked conviction. Our displacement technology specifically prevents pattern recognition. From sensors and targeting systems, yes, Chen agreed, but not from predictive analysis. You can't prevent patterns from existing. Physics demands them. You have to be somewhere to affect normal space. You have to transition between states following quantum rules. Those are patterns, and humans evolved to hunt patterns. Kael'thor watched the exchange with growing awe. He had spent his life believing that advanced technology determined supremacy. The Velchar had technology centuries beyond the Council's capabilities. Yet humans with barely a century of space travel had defeated them. Not through superior weapons or shields. Through understanding, Webb turned back to Gelnoth. Here's what happens now. You're going to tell us everything about your operations in this sector. How many Velchar ships are active? What your objectives are? Why you've been raiding Council vessels? And you're going to do it because you understand that we will hunt down every single ship until the threat is eliminated. You cannot threaten the Velchar supremacy, Gelnoth said, but the protest sounded weak. We have fleets technology your species cannot imagine. Then they'll learn the same lesson you did, Webb replied coldly. Humans don't fight wars we can't win. We calculate outcomes. We predict patterns. We find weaknesses. And we hunt until the threat is gone. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. The interrogation continued, but Kael'thor's attention drifted. His mind was processing everything he had witnessed. The rescue that anticipated his need before he expressed it. The battle where humans knew enemy positions before enemies knew themselves. The capture of a ship that could move through time. All of it was the same thing. Humans hunting. Hours later, Kael'thor stood in the Prescient's observation deck. Commander Chen joined him, looking out at the stars. We'll be returning you to Council space tomorrow, she said. Your rescue and the captured Velchar should provide plenty of evidence for your report. Commander Chen, may I ask you something? Of course. When you rescued me, you said you predicted my need. But I didn't send a complete distress call. How did you know exactly what I would say? Chen smiled slightly. We didn't predict your message, Navigator. We predicted your need. You were Zentari. Your ship was failing. Your oxygen was depleting. We didn't need to know what words you would use. We needed to understand what you needed: help, rescue, hope. Those needs are universal. Your species, your language, your specific situation, those were just details. We predicted the fundamental human need beneath it all. Human need? I'm not human. No, but the need for survival, for connection, for help in desperate times. Those are shared by every sentient species. Humans learned to recognize those needs by hunting prey that felt fear, that ran in predictable patterns when threatened. We learned to read need itself. That's what makes us effective. We don't just predict actions. We predict motivations. Kael'thor felt a chill run through him. That's terrifying, is it? Chen asked. Or is it comforting to know that when you're lost in deep space dying alone, humans will understand your need before you finish asking for help? The question hung in the air. Kael'thor thought about his rescue, about Webb's calm certainty in battle, about how human predictive technology was really just an ancient hunting instinct amplified by modern tools. Both, he finally answered. It's both terrifying and comforting. Chen nodded. That's probably the right response. The next day, Kael'thor was transferred to a council vessel that would return him home. As he prepared to depart, Captain Webb met him at the airlock. Navigator Kael'thor, your survey data helped us understand Velchar operations in this sector. The Council will receive our full report along with evidence of Velchar activities. Captain Webb, I need to ask, what will you do now? Webb's expression grew thoughtful. The Velchar captain revealed there are other ships operating in neighboring sectors. Different species being targeted. We'll continue hunting them. That's what the Prescient was built for, finding threats before they fully materialize and eliminating them. You're not worried about facing an entire civilization? Worried? No, cautious, always. But humans learned long ago that the most dangerous prey is the prey that thinks it can't be caught. The Velchar thought their temporal technology made them invincible. Now they know better. The rest will learn the same lesson. As Kael'thor boarded the council vessel, he looked back one last time at the Prescient. The massive warship hung in space, bristling with weapons and sensors. But its real weapon, he now understood, wasn't technology. It was the human ability to see patterns, to predict needs, to hunt across time and space with patience and determination. In his report to the council, Kael'thor would recommend major changes to how they viewed humanity. The other species saw humans as emotionally unstable newcomers who relied on aggression and luck. They were wrong. Humans were persistence predators who had adapted their ancient hunting instincts to hunt across the stars. They answered questions before they were asked because they understood need itself. They defeated impossible enemies because they saw patterns that others missed. The council called it predictive technology. But Kael'thor knew better. It was humanity doing what humans had always done, hunting with patience, understanding prey better than prey understood themselves, and never giving up until the threat was eliminated. As his ship jumped to FTL, leaving the Prescient behind, Kael'thor's last thought was simple but profound. The galaxy had spent centuries worrying about ancient species with advanced technology. Perhaps they should have been paying more attention to the young species that evolved to hunt the unhuntable. Because humans didn't just answer questions before they were asked, they understood needs before they were expressed. And in a dangerous galaxy full of predators, perhaps the most terrifying thing was a predator that hunted other predators with perfect, patient, inevitable success. The prescient remained in deep space, its sensors active, its crew alert. Captain Webb reviewed reports of new disappearances in an adjacent sector. More patterns emerging. More prey to hunt. Set course, he ordered simply. Let's go hunting. And the warship vanished into FTL, seeking the next threat before it fully manifested, answering needs before they became questions, hunting with the patience that only humans possessed.